How do you stay calm when your own son tells you you're useless and quietly moves every asset into his name? How do you walk away from the business you built and wait for the moment their phones start exploding with consequences? This is how my son and his wife found out that taking everything from me meant risking far more than they ever imagined. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Victor Hale, and I have walked the same warehouse floor almost every day for more than 30 years. I know every crack in the concrete, every strange sound the old forklifts make when they turn a corner, every smell of dust and oil when the morning trucks roll in. The young guys joke that I move slower now, and maybe that is true, but I still see everything. I notice who comes in late, who checks the straps on the pallets twice, who smiles when they say good morning, and who looks past me like I am part of the wall. When I started this business, it was just me, one rented truck, and a tiny storage unit with a leaking roof. Now we have 3 warehouses, a fleet of trucks, and our name printed on the side of containers that cross the country. People on the outside think success feels like power and pride. For me, it feels like tired feet, sore knees, and a quiet kind of peace when I lock the doors at night. Or at least, it used to feel like that before my own son decided I was useless. That morning began like many others. I parked my old sedan in the back lot and watched the newer cars in the front row. Ethan's shiny SUV sat right by the door, next to Kayla's electric car with her custom plates. Their cars always faced the street so people could see them when they drove by. Mine was hidden behind the dumpsters because I did not care what strangers thought when they looked at our parking lot. I walked in through the side entrance, nodded to the guys in the loading bay, and asked about a delayed shipment from the night before. One of the younger workers told me that Ethan already handled it and that I did not need to worry. I moved down the aisle, running my hand along the wooden crates like I always did, counting the labels without even looking directly at them. My mind kept its own little map of inventory. When I reached the main floor, I heard loud music coming from the open space near the front office. It was not the usual radio station the workers liked, but some kind of upbeat song that sounded like it belonged at a club, not in a warehouse. I followed the noise and saw a small crowd near the pallet racks. Ethan stood on a low pallet like it was a stage, one hand in his pocket, the other waving around as he talked. Kayla stood beside him in her stylish jacket and bright sneakers, holding a tablet. Around them, workers formed a half circle, many of them with nervous smiles on their faces. Ethan was telling everyone that this was the start of a new era for the company. He said that the business had to become modern, focused, and efficient, and that some old habits were dragging them down. The way he said old habits made a few of the guys glance in my direction before looking away again. Kayla added that the company had been run from the gut for too long and that now they would be making data-driven decisions. She explained that they had a new software system that would help track everything and that everyone needed to follow the new procedures exactly as she designed them. She told them that things would feel strange at first, but that it was all part of growing up as a company. She acted like she was talking to children who needed to be taught how to stand up straight. I stood near the back, behind a stack of boxes, listening. I did not interrupt. I remembered standing in almost the same spot years before, explaining to a much smaller group how we would survive a rough winter by picking up extra contracts, tightening expenses, and working late. Back then, Ethan had been a teenager sweeping the floor, proud just to be allowed to stay and listen. Now he spoke like he had built all this with his bare hands. When he finished his little speech, he noticed me and gave a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. He told the workers that they could get back to it and then walked over to me. Kayla walked with him, still holding her tablet like a shield. Ethan told me that the meeting was about helping the younger staff feel motivated and that he did not think I would be interested in all the new systems. The way he said it, it sounded more like a gentle push away than an invitation. I told him that anything that helped the workers was my business. He replied that they needed clear, strong direction and that sometimes that meant letting go of the past. Kayla looked me up and down and said that the brand needed a fresh face. She said that buyers and partners wanted to see leaders who fit the market and that Ethan was perfect for that. She said it in a smooth, polite tone, but the meaning was sharp. In her eyes, I did not fit anything anymore. I was just a man who happened to stand where the stage used to be. I did not argue. I just nodded and said I would be in my office if anyone needed something. Later, in the staff break room, I walked in to pour myself coffee. 2 of the younger loaders were sitting at the table, scrolling their phones. They did not see me at first. One of them said that it was good the company finally had real leadership. He said that Ethan and Kayla knew what they were doing and that the place had been stuck in the 19th century before. The other laughed and said that I would probably wander around touching boxes until they finally retired me. When they noticed me by the coffee machine, they froze. Their faces went red. One mumbled that he had to grab a pallet and rushed out. The other quickly changed the subject and asked if I had seen the big game. I told him I had not and left with my coffee in my hand, my heartbeat steady but heavy. I went back to my old office at the far end of the building. It was small and plain, with a metal desk, 2 chairs, and a calendar on the wall. I still liked to work with paper, even if most things lived in the computer now. On the desk lay a stack of invoices and a printout from the new system that I did not ask for. A memo sat on top, written by Kayla, explaining that all approvals would now go through Ethan and that I should avoid creating confusion by giving direct instructions to staff without consulting them first. She used friendly words, but I understood the message. I sat down, flipped through the invoices, and checked a few numbers against my notes. Something about the way expenses were rising made my stomach tighten, but I did not have details yet. When I tried to log into the new software system, my access was limited. I could see some reports, but not the deeper sections. A notification popped up saying that my permissions had been updated by the administrator. I did not need anyone to tell me who that administrator was. Around midday, Ethan stepped into my office without knocking. He told me that he needed my keys to the front office and the main server room just for now, because the new consultants were coming in and they needed clean control. He said that it was temporary, that I should not worry, and that Kayla's team would handle the technical side. He tried to make it sound practical, but the way he held out his hand made it clear this was not a request. I looked at him for a long moment, then handed over the keys. He said that I was doing the right thing by letting go, and that it would be easier for everyone. I answered that I only wanted what was best for the company and the people who worked there. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. I walked the floor, checking on shipments, helping a driver fill out paperwork, giving quiet advice to a new hire who still mixed up the sections of the warehouse. People looked unsure when they saw me. Some smiled with real warmth. Others avoided eye contact, as if standing next to me might cause trouble. I could feel the balance shifting, not in a loud, sudden way, but like a floor slowly leaning under my feet. Just before closing time, I heard raised voices near the front. When I came out of my office, I saw Ethan and Kayla standing by the entrance to the warehouse, talking to a small group of supervisors. Ethan told them that from next week, all shift schedules, overtime approvals, and time-off requests would go through him and Kayla only. He said that too many mixed messages came from different places and that it was confusing the team. One of the older supervisors asked if that meant they should stop coming to me with problems. Kayla answered that it would probably be easier if they did, and that they did not want to bother me with day-to-day matters anymore. I stood a few steps away, out of the circle. No one called me over. No one asked what I thought. Ethan ended the little talk by saying that this was what real leadership looked like and that the future of the company depended on everyone trusting his decisions. The workers nodded because what else could they do? A few glanced in my direction with uncomfortable eyes. I pretended not to notice. When the last truck left and the lights began to dim, I walked slowly toward the exit. As I passed the main wall near the loading bay, something caught my eye. Ethan was standing on a ladder, pulling down a large framed mission statement I had written years ago. It talked about honesty, steady work, and taking care of our people so they could take care of our clients. The frame scraped against the wall as he lifted it down. Kayla stood below, holding a new glossy sign wrapped in plastic, ready to replace it. For a second, Ethan looked over his shoulder at me. He said that the old sign did not match the brand anymore and that they needed something more modern to impress visitors. I did not answer. I just watched as he lowered the frame into Kayla's hands. Then I turned toward my office one last time. On the wall above my desk, the calendar hung crooked, the page marked with a red circle around next month's date for the bank's annual review meeting, the ink standing out like a quiet warning nobody else had noticed yet. When I sat in my car that evening, I did not start the engine right away. The parking lot was quiet, the sky already turning orange behind the roof of the warehouse. I watched the young workers leaving in groups, walking past my old sedan without really seeing it. Ethan's SUV and Kayla's electric car shone under the last light of the day. I thought about how different things looked when I first parked here with a second-hand pickup and a paper map of delivery routes on the seat beside me. Back then, I had nothing but long hours, a tired body, and a stubborn belief that I could build something that would outlast me. I first rented a tiny storage unit on the edge of town when Ethan was still in grade school. At night, I would pick him up from my sister's house after my last delivery. Sometimes he would sit on a stack of boxes and do his homework while I checked inventory under a single bare light bulb. On weekends, I let him ride in the passenger seat and hand me paperwork as we went from client to client. He liked the feeling of being part of something important. I always told him that this was our future, not just mine. Over time, the rented unit turned into a leased warehouse, which later became the property we bought. Each step was slow and careful, never flashy. When the business finally made enough money to breathe a little, I met with a careful, quiet lawyer named Priya. She advised me to protect the company name, the logo, and the property. She spoke in calm, patient sentences about deeds, registrations, and long-term security, and I trusted her judgment. At that time, I did not think about family conflict or betrayal. I only thought about storms, recessions, and the risk that one accident could destroy everything. I asked her how to make sure the company would survive if something happened to me. She suggested certain structures and documents. I followed her advice because I wanted Ethan to have something stable when he grew up. I never imagined that those same protections would one day stand between us. Ethan showed early talent with numbers and computers. In high school, he helped me track orders on a cheap laptop and build simple spreadsheets for fuel and maintenance costs. He liked telling me how much more efficient things could be with better software. I liked seeing him excited about the business. When he finished college, coming to work for the company seemed natural. I made him operations manager after a few years, not because he was my son, but because he knew the routes, the clients, and the staff better than anyone else. The workers respected him at first because they saw him on the floor, getting dirty and tired with the rest of them. Kayla came into the picture later. She was smart, charming, and always looked like she had walked out of a design magazine. She worked in marketing somewhere downtown when Ethan met her. He brought her to a company barbecue one summer. She told me the brand needed a full makeover. She said the trucks looked old, the logo looked boring, and the website looked like it came from another century. She laughed while she said it, but there was edge behind her teeth. Ethan smiled proudly because he liked that she talked big. I told her we would think about it. Over the next few years, Kayla's influence grew piece by piece. She helped with a rebrand project and took over our social media. She told me that clients wanted to see a story, not just boxes and trucks. She began posting photos of Ethan at meetings, Ethan shaking hands with vendors, Ethan standing in front of stacked pallets like a model. When she needed an older, serious image for a post, she sometimes used a photo of me, but she described Ethan as the visionary leader and called me the founder who trusted the new generation. I did not complain. I thought this was just how young people talked online. I told myself the details did not matter as long as the work stayed honest. Looking back, I see where the respect started to slide. It did not happen when Ethan took his first leadership role. It happened when attention from outside started to grow. New clients came in because they liked the polished brand and the quick responses on social media. Kayla said that people wanted to feel excited, not just safe. She told Ethan that he needed to look like a strong leader, not like a son who still listened to his father. I noticed small changes. Ethan began calling me by my first name instead of Dad when we were in meetings. He started explaining my own stories back to me in front of staff as if I had not heard them before. The night at the upscale restaurant was when I first understood how far things had gone. Ethan and Kayla invited me to celebrate a big new contract. When I arrived, they were already there with a group of friends from her world, not mine. Everyone wore sharp clothes and spoke about startups, branding, and personal images. The menu looked strange to me, full of dishes I could not pronounce. I ordered something simple and listened. Kayla introduced Ethan as the founder of a fast-growing logistics brand. She mentioned me as someone who had helped in the early days and taught Ethan the value of hard work. Her friends praised Ethan for taking over and leveling up the company. When one of them asked how long the company had been around, Ethan said something like since he got serious about it, maybe 6 or 7 years. That number cut deep because I knew the real age of the company, down to the month. I had started it the year his mother was pregnant with him. I sat there, stirring my drink, while his friends said it was impressive to build such a strong business so quickly. No one asked me for my version of the story. No one asked when I first rented that leaking storage unit or slept in a chair beside the first truck. I smiled and stayed quiet. Making a scene in front of strangers would not give me any dignity back. Later that week, I met Lena at the small cafe near the warehouse. She had worked for me since her 20s and never pretended to be something she was not. She told me some of the staff felt lost. She said they did not know whose instructions to follow when my habits clashed with Ethan's new rules. She admitted that Ethan sometimes blamed delays on my slow decisions and told them that I did not understand the software. She did not say it to hurt me. She said it because she thought I should know how people were talking. I thanked her and told her not to worry about my feelings. I also told her to keep doing her job well and follow procedures because I did not want her caught in the middle. I tried to talk to Ethan calmly after that. In his penthouse living room, surrounded by glass walls and city lights, he paced while I sat on the edge of a fancy couch that did not feel comfortable at all. I told him that there was nothing wrong with new systems, but that the way he spoke about me in front of staff was disrespectful. I reminded him that the workers had known me since he was too small to reach the steering wheel. He answered that I was taking things too personally and that I did not understand modern leadership. He said his generation needed clear authority, and that constant reference to the past made him look weak. Kayla joined the conversation with a glass of wine in her hand. She told me that clients liked consistency and that it confused them when they saw two different faces of leadership. She said that for the sake of the brand, it would be better if I took a background role and let Ethan appear as the sole decision-maker. She repeated that people wanted a sharp, focused image, not a story about how things used to be. I heard the message behind her smooth words. They wanted the story without the man who actually lived it. I drove home that night with the city lights flashing in my rearview mirror. My hands felt heavy on the steering wheel. I thought about the years of early mornings, the nights driving through storms to make deliveries when drivers called in sick, the times I crawled under broken trucks in the rain because we could not afford proper repair crews. None of those memories fit in the neat, edited world of Kayla's online posts. To her viewers, I was just a background character, an old man who had stepped aside so the young, bright couple could shine. A few days later, back at the warehouse, Kayla held a meeting with some of the office staff and junior managers. I passed by and heard her describe a plan to refresh the origin story on the website. She told them they would focus on Ethan's vision and his decision to transform a small family operation into a serious brand. She said that long stories about the early days could be cut or shortened because modern visitors did not have the patience to read them. I knew that those long stories were my life. I kept walking because if I stopped, I might say something I would regret. That night, after another slow walk through the quiet warehouse, I finally went home and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. I unlocked my phone and opened the social media page for the company. The first image that filled the screen was a new post from Kayla. In the photo, Ethan and Kayla stood in front of the warehouse entrance, both in matching jackets with the company logo, smiling at the camera with confident eyes. The caption said that they were finally taking full control of the family business and driving it into the future. There was no mention of me anywhere. Underneath, likes and comments were climbing fast, line after line praising Ethan and Kayla for building something from nothing, while the man who had actually done it sat alone in his kitchen, reading every word in silence. The line finally crossed on a cloudy Tuesday that started like any other. I walked the warehouse floor, checked a few pallets, nodded to workers, and tried to stay out of Ethan and Kayla's way. I still believed I could keep things running quietly while they played modern leaders on the surface. Before mid-morning, Ethan appeared in my doorway. He said we had a leadership meeting in the conference room. His tone said it was not a request. The glass-walled room looked out over the office area. Staff walked by with folders in their hands, glancing in and then looking away. I took a seat at the long table. Kayla sat across from me with her tablet and a stack of printed pages. Ethan stood at the end of the table with his arms folded like a man rehearsing a speech. He started with soft words about respect and family. He said he appreciated everything I had built and that he would always be grateful. Then the sentences changed. He said the business had outgrown my style and that my presence in daily operations confused younger staff. He told me some clients felt unsure when they saw an older man walking the floor asking questions, while all the branding showed Ethan as the leader. He said none of this was personal, just practical. Kayla slid the printed pages toward me. She said they were proposals for a new structure. Calmly, she explained that most assets and accounts had already been moved into a streamlined company in Ethan's name for tax and efficiency reasons. She said the original company still existed, but that, in reality, the new one held all the important contracts and vehicles. She described a new role for me as an advisor, with no signing power and no direct authority. She called it a way to honor my legacy while letting Ethan lead without mixed signals. I looked down at the pages. Ethan's name filled most of the lines. Mine appeared in small sections about the past. The company name sat beside a slightly changed brand title, like someone had taken the story and rubbed my fingerprints off it. I asked when these changes had been made. Ethan said they had been done step by step over the last year. He said he did not want to worry me with details. I asked who now owned the trucks, who held the main vendor contracts, who spoke to the bank. Ethan answered that his name was on everything important now and that this was better for everyone. He said banks liked dealing with one clear decision-maker who understood modern finance. He told me I should relax and enjoy retirement. He used that word like a gift he was offering. Then he said the sentence that sat in the room like a stone. He said the company could not carry dead weight, and that, in the modern version of the business, I was basically useless. He did not raise his voice. He did not look ashamed. He said it the way someone comments on fuel costs going up, as if it were just another number on a sheet. For a moment, all I heard was the faint beep of a forklift backing up outside the glass. I remembered Ethan as a boy, sitting on boxes in my first rented unit, feet swinging, asking if he could help. Now he stood in front of me, explaining that his own father had become a burden. The distance between those two pictures almost made me dizzy. I could have shouted. I could have listed every night I slept in the office, every storm I drove through, every birthday I missed so paychecks would clear. Instead, I let the anger pass through me and leave something hard and quiet behind. I told him if he was sure about his decisions, he should own them fully. I said I did not want to create confusion. I pushed the pages back across the table without signing. He frowned and said he would send final retirement documents soon. He reminded me that, practically speaking, everything already belonged to him. Kayla watched my face with polite interest, like she was watching a test result come in. She thanked me for understanding. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out of the room. I did not go back to my office. I stepped outside by the side door and let the cold air hit my face until my hands stopped shaking. Then I got in my car and drove across town to Marcus's office. His place sat above a bakery that always smelled like warm bread. He had been my accountant since the days when I tracked expenses in a notebook. We did not talk as much after Ethan took over most of the numbers, but Marcus still handled some filings. When I walked in, he looked surprised. He said Ethan usually came alone now. I told him I needed a clear picture of what had been happening with the company's money and assets over the past year. He turned his monitor so I could see. Quietly, he walked me through bank statements, ledgers, and transaction lists. He showed me how funds had moved from the old company account into a new one under Ethan's name. He pointed to re-registered trucks and trailers, renewed contracts signed by the new entity, and fresh lines of credit with tighter terms. My name appeared clearly as guarantor and owner in older documents, then faded to nothing in newer ones. Marcus admitted he had assumed I approved all of this. Ethan talked as if he spoke for both of us. Marcus did not want to step into family business. I told him I understood. I asked him to print a small stack of key summaries and statements. He did, tapping them straight before sliding them across the desk. I saw the pattern at once. Money pulled out for image, not structure. Loans taken on the belief that nothing ever truly goes wrong. I thanked him and left. I still did not have a full plan, but I had something solid in my hands again. Facts, dates, numbers. On the drive home, the anger cooled into something else. A calm knowledge that Ethan and Kayla were playing with pieces they did not really understand. At home, I went to the small office at the back of the house. The air smelled like paper and dust. A metal cabinet stood against the wall, its drawers labeled in my handwriting. At the bottom, behind old folders, sat a steel safe. I had not opened it in months. I knelt, turned the dial, and listened for the soft click I knew by heart. Inside lay the bones of the business. A thick folder with property deeds, another with trademark certificates, a file about the bank guarantee, and envelopes with client contracts that named me personally. Next to them lay a small silver USB drive where I had once stored scanned copies of everything important. I set the folders on the desk but did not open them. I did not need to read each page to remember what they said. The labels were enough. Standing in that quiet room, I understood something simple. Ethan believed that moving accounts and changing logos gave him full control. He never thought about the foundation under his feet, the one I built years ago with Priya's guidance. He knew how to polish the surface. He had never bothered to study the structure. There was no point arguing with him again. He would hear any warning as jealousy and any boundary as attack. So I made a different choice. I would not beg for space in his story. I would protect what was mine by right and by law and let time and system speak to him in a language he could not ignore. As I stood there, my phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Ethan appeared on the screen. He said he would send final retirement documents tomorrow and that, after signing, it would be better if I stopped coming to the warehouse so the team could adjust. He added that Kayla believed this was the kindest way. I read the message once, set the phone down beside the small silver USB drive, and listened to the low hum of the old computer in the corner, steady and patient like a witness no one had noticed yet. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had trouble sleeping, but because my thoughts felt clear for the first time in weeks. The anger from yesterday had cooled into something steady. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a small notebook I kept for personal notes. On the first blank page, I wrote a simple list in plain handwriting. At the top, I wrote that I needed to understand my legal position. Below that, I wrote 3 names, Marcus, Priya, and Daniel. I already had numbers for all of them. I did not plan a big attack. I planned to tell them the truth, step by step, and see what the law said. When I finished my coffee, I took the silver USB drive, slipped it into my pocket, and left the house without going near the warehouse. Instead, I drove across town to Priya's office. Her building was older, with thick walls and quiet hallways that smelled like paper and polish. Her nameplate sat beside a door with frosted glass. Inside, everything was neat and calm, from the dark wood shelves to the framed certificates on the wall. She had not changed much since the days when I first came to her with nothing but a dream and a lot of worry. She looked a little older, like me, but her voice sounded exactly the same. Careful, measured, and serious. She asked how the business was going. I told her it was growing fast on the outside and rotting slowly on the inside. Then I explained what had happened in the last year, how Ethan and Kayla had moved accounts and assets into a new company under his name, how they had given me a new title that meant nothing, and how my son had told me I was useless to the business now. I spoke without raising my voice. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked for facts. That was what I liked about her. She did not react with shock or pity. She wanted dates, documents, and signatures. I handed her the stack of summaries Marcus had printed and told her about the folders in my safe. I did not give her everything at once, just enough to draw the outline. She studied the papers, tracing some lines with her finger, and then leaned back in her chair. She reminded me of the structures we had created years ago. She told me in simple language that the property deeds, trademark registrations, and certain client agreements were still tied directly to me and to the original entity we had formed. She said that what Ethan had done with operating assets and bank accounts might be allowed on paper, but that he had moved them without fully understanding how they connected to my guarantees and rights. I felt strange hearing my own safety read back to me like a manual I had written and then forgotten. Priya warned me not to rush into threats or emotional decisions. She said that sometimes the strongest move was to inform the right institutions instead of confronting the wrong people. She suggested I notify the bank that I was no longer in control of daily operations and that transfers had been made without my ongoing involvement. She also said we should review all client contracts where my name appeared as the direct contact or signatory. She offered to help, but she was clear that every step must stay inside the rules. I agreed. I never wanted to hurt Ethan in a criminal way. I only wanted to stop him from using my work as his toy. When I left her office, I did not feel triumphant. I felt anchored. There was a path, and it did not depend on shouting. From there, I drove to the branch of the bank where our main line of credit lived. The building looked like every other bank, clean and polite. Daniel, the relationship manager, had known me for years. We were not friends, but we respected each other. He knew that when I signed something, I understood it and took it seriously. When he saw me, he looked slightly surprised and then a little worried, as if he sensed that a quiet man in his office in the middle of a workday meant something was wrong. I told him that the company he thought he knew had changed. I explained that Ethan had taken over daily operations and had moved most of the active accounts into a new structure that existed mainly under Ethan's name. I told him that I no longer had access to important systems and that I had not approved some of the recent credit moves in the way he might assume. Then I reminded him gently of the documents I had signed years ago, the personal guarantee for the main credit line, the property pledged as collateral, and the conditions under which the bank calculated its risk. Daniel listened with his arms folded, his eyes fixed on a point on the table. He checked his computer, clicking through screens, and his expression grew tight. He saw what Marcus had seen, new credit, new transfers, and bolder spending patterns, all backed by a foundation built in my name. I watched him understand that the person holding the risk had been pushed aside by the person making the decisions. He did not say that out loud. Bank people rarely speak in that direct way. Instead, he said that from the bank's perspective, any major change in control of the business or in the way assets were used should have been reported. He said that moving value out of the original company while relying on the old guarantees could be a serious issue. He told me the bank would need to review its position and perhaps call a joint meeting with all parties to clarify who was responsible for what. I told him I would cooperate fully and that I wanted the bank to be safe, because if the bank was at risk, then everything I had built was at risk too. I added that I would not sign any new documents from Ethan without reviewing them with Priya. He nodded and said he understood. When I left the bank, the air outside felt sharper, like the weather had shifted even though the sky looked the same. I drove home, not to rest, but to work. In my small office, I turned on the old computer and set the silver USB drive beside the keyboard. I began opening drawers, pulling out folders, and laying them in neat rows on the desk. Property deeds in one stack, trademark and registration papers in another, client contracts in a third. I did not read every line yet. I focused on scanning and saving. The scanner whirred softly as page after page turned into digital files. On the computer, I created folders with clear names: property, trademarks, clients, bank, guarantees, letters. For each folder, I made a backup on the USB drive. I was not hiding anything. I was preserving the truth in a form that could not be lost in someone else's office. While the scanner hummed, my phone buzzed on the desk more than once. A message from Ethan appeared, asking why I had not been at the warehouse that morning and reminding me about his new plans for scheduling. I ignored it for the moment. My priority was not his plans. My priority was to make sure I knew where every important piece of my own life was stored. I also opened my email and started searching for old conversations with key clients, the ones who had stuck with us through slow winters and sudden fuel price jumps. In those messages, they often wrote directly to me by name, not just to the company. I flagged important ones and saved copies into a folder. I did not need anyone to promise loyalty. I just needed a record of the relationships as they really existed. As the hours passed, my small office turned into a quiet control center. The floor around the desk was bare. The desk itself was covered in ordered piles. The computer screen showed tidy lists of files. The USB drive sat beside the keyboard like a small metal witness. By late afternoon, my back felt stiff, but my mind felt lighter. I had not hurt anyone. I had not broken any rules. I had simply taken back my own clarity. That evening, I stepped out to the kitchen to make tea. As the kettle warmed, I heard my phone buzz again. I checked the screen. This time the name was not Ethan. It was Priya, I answered. Her voice was calm as always, but there was a new firmness in it. She said that after reviewing the summaries and checking some registrations, she believed the situation was more serious than simple family tension. She told me that the combination of asset transfers, unreported changes in control, and continued use of property and brand tied to my guarantees could put not just me, but also the bank and certain clients at risk. She said she had already reached out to the bank's legal department. They had agreed that a formal review meeting needed to happen soon. A few minutes after I ended the call with her, my phone lit up again. This time, it was Daniel from the bank. He told me the bank had decided to schedule an urgent joint meeting at the warehouse. He said they wanted Ethan present, along with key staff, to discuss the credit situation, the collateral, and the way assets had been moved. He asked if I could attend with my counsel. I said I would be there. After I hung up, I stood in the doorway of my office and looked at the neat rows of folders and the small red light still glowing on the USB drive. The house was quiet, but in my mind, I could already hear the echo of voices on the warehouse floor. Voices that would no longer say I was useless without also hearing the weight of the systems they had taken for granted. 3 days passed between the meeting in Priya's office and the moment my phone lit up with those missed calls. In those 3 days, I did not set foot in the warehouse. I woke up early, made my coffee, and started each day with the same simple question written at the top of my notebook page. I wrote that my goal was to tell the truth to the right people, protect what was mine by law, and avoid shouting matches that went nowhere. I let Ethan and Kayla have the stage they wanted, while I moved quietly in places they never thought about. On the first morning of those 3, I met Priya again. We sat in her office with the blinds half closed against the sun. She had already spoken with the bank's legal department. She told me they were now very aware that the person carrying the main risk was no longer in control of the daily decisions. She spoke plainly. In her view, it was no longer just a family issue. It was a structural and financial problem that could pull several parties down if no one acted carefully. She laid a neat stack of papers on the table between us. She did not push them toward me. She explained each group slowly, in plain language. One set clarified how the property that housed the warehouse was held. Another set formalized my role in relation to the company name and how it could be used. Another dealt with my position as guarantor and the conditions under which I could step back if management changed without my consent. She never used dramatic words. She described these papers as adjustments, corrections that lined up the legal picture with the reality that had existed for years. I listened, asked questions, and took my time before touching a pen. I did not want revenge dressed up as paperwork. I wanted fairness, and I wanted clarity. Priya reminded me that signing these documents did not attack Ethan. They simply made sure that if he chose to operate without me, he also carried responsibility that matched his control. She said that if he insisted I was useless and unnecessary, then it made sense to free me from certain burdens he had been happy to let me hold in the dark. When I finally signed, my hand was steady. I did not feel like a conqueror. I felt like a man putting labels back on boxes that someone else had shuffled around. Each signature was a quiet sentence that said, "This is mine, and this is yours, and the bank and the clients will know the difference." After we finished, she collected the papers, placed them in folders, and told me she would file and send them where they needed to go. She also told me that the bank had confirmed the joint meeting at the warehouse floor. It would happen soon, and everyone would be there. On the second day, I went to a small courthouse building and waited in a lobby with dull tiles and hard chairs. A notary sat at a simple desk near one wall. Priya joined me for part of the process. There were more signatures, more stamps, more quiet explanations. Nothing dramatic happened. No one raised their voice. People in that building saw families and companies make changes every day. To them, I was just another man in a plain jacket, making sure his name and his life lined up on the right lines of the right forms. When everything was done, I stepped outside into the weak noon light. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and took a slow breath. Behind me, the building held copies of things Ethan had never bothered to read. Ahead of me, traffic moved in its usual rhythm, unaware of any of it. I walked to my car, feeling oddly light, as if I had set down a heavy box I had carried far too long on my own. That afternoon, I returned home instead of driving past the warehouse. I did not want to be tempted to look through the open doors like a father standing outside a window. In my small office, I checked my computer. There were new emails from the bank, written in formal language, addressed to both me and the company. They confirmed that certain lines of credit were under review. They requested full information from Ethan about recent transfers. They copied Priya on the messages. I did not reply. It was not my turn to speak in that space anymore. I had already said what I needed to say. On the third morning, I cooked breakfast in my kitchen and ate at the table alone, as I usually did. The house was quiet except for the sound of the fridge and the birds outside. On the chair across from me lay an old photo of Ethan as a boy, holding a toy truck with our first logo drawn on it in marker. I had found that picture in a drawer the night before when I was looking for a spare pen. For a long time, I stared at the image, trying to connect that boy to the man who told me I was useless because his wife said so. Around mid-morning, a message from Ethan appeared on my phone. He wrote that he wanted to formalize my retirement at the upcoming meeting at the warehouse. He said they planned to honor me with a small speech and a framed photo for the office wall. He added that, after that, it would be better if I stopped confusing people by showing up around the trucks and giving my old-style advice. He said this would help the staff fully commit to his leadership. At the end of the message, he thanked me for understanding, as if I had already agreed. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down on the table beside my plate. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I washed the dishes, wiped the counters, and swept the floor. I found it easier to think when my hands were busy with simple tasks. While I worked, I decided something important. I would not go to that meeting as a man begging for a place. I would go as a man who knew exactly what he still carried and what he had given back. I would speak only when necessary, and I would let documents and institutions do most of the talking. In the afternoon, I drove once more to Priya's office. We sat together and walked through the likely questions the bank might ask. She told me to keep my answers plain and focus on facts. She reminded me to stay calm when Ethan and Kayla reacted, because they would likely feel cornered and try to blame me. I told her I had been blamed for things my whole life and that this would not break me. She almost smiled and said that calm people had more power than they knew, especially when the loud ones had tied their own knots. When I left, the sky was already turning gray. I stopped at a small store to buy a few groceries. Nothing special, just enough for a simple dinner. On the way out, my phone buzzed again. There were messages from Lena, short and polite, asking if everything was all right because she had seen some strange faces from the bank at the warehouse and staff were whispering. I told her to focus on her work and not to take sides yet. I promised that whatever happened, I would not let it fall on the workers if I could help it. She replied with a simple thank you and a message that she trusted me. Back home, I cooked stew in a pot and sliced bread while the smell filled the small kitchen. I sat at the table and ate slowly, tasting each bite, feeling each second. It might have been my last quiet meal before everything shifted. After I finished, I washed the dishes by hand instead of using the machine. The sound of water and plates covered the faint buzz of my phone at first. When I finally dried my hands and picked it up, I saw a long list of notifications on the lock screen. At first, there were just a few missed calls from unknown numbers. Then I saw Ethan's name, Kayla's name, the warehouse number, and the bank's general line, mixed together in a column. As I watched, the phone lit up again with another call, then another. I pressed the side button and let it go to voicemail. I opened the call log out of habit and saw the total number at the top. 97. 97 missed calls in the last few hours. Ethan, Kayla, the office staff, the warehouse floor, the bank, and a few numbers I did not recognize at all. It was as if the whole world inside that building had suddenly realized something at the same time and decided that I, the man they had called useless, was now very necessary. I did not feel joy. I did not feel pity. I felt a clear line inside me. On one side were the years I had spent carrying everything, even when no one saw it. On the other side were these last days, where I had finally put things down in the proper places. There was no going back across that line. I placed the phone face down on the table and walked to the small office. On the back of my chair hung a plain jacket I wore on cooler days at the warehouse. I put it on, feeling the weight of the fabric settle across my shoulders. I checked that the silver USB drive was still in my pocket, then took my car keys from the hook by the door. As I stepped out into the evening air, the sky over the city was low and heavy, the kind of sky that makes sounds travel farther. Somewhere across town, in a building I had built with my own hands and years, people were pacing, shouting into phones, and looking out the glass doors toward the parking lot, waiting for me to appear. I locked my front door behind me, walked to my car, and started the engine. The phone in my pocket buzzed again and again, but I did not look at the screen. I turned the wheel toward the warehouse and drove into the growing dark, letting the ring of those 97 calls follow me like a distant alarm I had already decided how to answer. The warehouse lot looked different the moment I turned in. Usually the trucks sat in their neat rows, some loading, some waiting, everything moving in a slow, steady rhythm. That evening, half the trucks were parked crooked, a few with doors open and no one inside. Several cars I did not recognize sat near the entrance, along with Daniel's bank sedan. I parked my old sedan in its usual spot near the back, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment. The phone in my pocket buzzed again. I did not check who it was, I already knew. Inside the warehouse, lights blazed brighter than usual. As I walked toward the big doors, I heard voices echoing off the concrete, louder and more tense than normal work noise. When I stepped through the entrance, I saw almost everyone gathered on the main floor. Supervisors stood in a cluster, workers whispered in small groups, and a few people held clipboards without writing anything. Near the middle of the space, Daniel from the bank stood with a serious expression, a slim folder in his hands. Beside him were two people in neat suits from the bank's legal side. Priya stood a little to one side, calm and straight-backed, her own folder under her arm. Ethan paced near them, face pale, one hand in his hair, the other gripping his phone. Kayla stood close to him, eyes wide, makeup a little smeared around the edges. When Ethan saw me, he walked over quickly, almost running. He demanded to know why the bank had frozen the accounts. He said the payroll transfer had bounced, fuel cards were not working, and several vendors had called in a panic. He told me the bank claimed something was wrong with the guarantees and collateral and that my name kept coming up. He spoke as if he had been attacked from behind. I listened, then told him he should speak to Daniel and the bank team because they were the ones who had requested this meeting. I walked past him toward the small open space where pallets had been pushed aside to create a rough circle. Priya met my eyes, gave the smallest nod, and stepped closer to stand near me. Daniel cleared his throat and asked everyone to quiet down. The noise faded. Forklifts sat idle. A few workers leaned on pallets, arms crossed, faces tense. He explained in careful, professional words that the bank had reviewed recent movements of money, assets, and accounts. He said that the person who carried the main guarantee, the man who owned the property and certain rights, had been pushed out of daily management without any clear report to the bank. He said that, from the bank's perspective, this changed the risk profile. He told them that because of unapproved changes in control and collateral, the bank had frozen lines of credit and was considering calling certain loans due. Ethan tried to cut in. He said he was now the real owner and that everything had been done to modernize the business. He told Daniel that I had agreed in spirit to step aside and that this was just a formal step they had forgotten to mention. Daniel did not raise his voice. He simply pointed out that in the bank's documents, my name, not Ethan's, still appeared as the property owner, main guarantor, and primary contact. He said the bank could not accept a situation where someone without those responsibilities moved money and assets freely while hiding the shift in power. The workers watched all this with wide eyes. They were seeing the inside of a system they usually never thought about. One of the older drivers asked quietly if this meant the company was closing. Daniel did not answer directly. He said the bank needed clarity on who actually owned what and who had the right to run operations in this building. At that point, Priya stepped forward. She introduced herself to those who did not know her. She said she had worked with me for many years. In plain language, she laid out the structure we had set up long ago. She said the warehouse building itself was owned by a holding company under my control. She explained that the company name and logo were legally registered to me and that the operating company used them under a license that could be withdrawn if certain terms were broken. She also mentioned that several key client contracts named me personally as the responsible party, not Ethan's new company. Ethan turned to me in shock. He asked why I never told him all this. I answered that he had never asked. I said that when he took over operations, I tried to guide him, but he preferred to believe I was just an old man walking around touching boxes. I said that he had told me I was useless, that he and Kayla had moved assets and accounts in secret because they thought surface changes were enough. Now the deeper structure was answering back. Kayla tried to argue that their lawyers had said everything was fine. Priya corrected her gently. She said that maybe someone had told them how to move things on paper, but no one had forced them to hide the change in control from the bank, or to keep using my property, my name, and my guarantees while pushing me out of decisions. She said that those choices belonged to Ethan and Kayla alone. The bank team nodded. Daniel said the bank could not continue under the current arrangement. He said that either the structure had to change to match the reality Ethan wanted, or operations under this roof, under this name, would have to stop until risk was acceptable again. There was a long silence. Somewhere in the back, a metal bar clanged as someone shifted their weight. I stepped forward and placed my own folder on a low pallet between us. I opened it slowly. Inside were copies of the warehouse property deed showing my holding company as owner of the building. Next to that lay the trademark certificates for the company name and logo. Beside those were letters from 3 of our biggest long-term clients, all written in the last 2 days. In each, the client stated clearly that their trust and contracts were with me personally, and that if I left this structure and formed a new one, they would follow me. I did not wave the papers in the air or speak loudly. I simply described what each document said. I outlined how the lease between my holding company and the operating company could be ended if I, as owner and guarantor, was removed without cause. I explained that the trademark license allowed me to pull the name back if my role was erased while my obligations stayed in place. Then I said one more thing very plainly. I told everyone that I had signed new documents in the last days. Those documents transferred the property fully into my holding company and formalized my right to withdraw the brand license. They also allowed me to step down as guarantor if control shifted without my consent. I said that I did not want to destroy what we had built. I did not want to leave workers without income or clients without service. So I offered a simple path. I told the bank, the staff, and Ethan that I was prepared to create a new operating company under clear terms. I said that any worker who chose to come with me would have steady work as long as there were clients and cash. I said that the 3 major clients who had written letters would sign fresh contracts with the new entity. I promised the bank that in this new structure, my role, ownership, and guarantees would all line up honestly. Then I turned to Ethan and Kayla. I told them that if they wanted to keep their own company, they were free to do so. They could find a different building, a different name, and clients who believed in them. But if they wanted to avoid deeper legal trouble right now, there were conditions. They would have to sign documents giving up any claim to this building, this name, and any contracts that depended on my personal guarantees. They would also need to accept that their attempts to move assets secretly had broken trust, and that I would no longer stand in front of them as a shield if things went wrong. Ethan stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. Kayla's face shifted from anger to calculation to fear. She asked what would happen if they refused. Priya answered calmly. She said that if they refused, I had the right to end the lease, pull the brand, notify all clients and vendors, and support the bank in calling loans under the broken covenants. In plain words, she said that their company would be left with debt, no building, no brand, and a damaged reputation. No one in the circle spoke for a long moment. I could feel the workers watching, weighing their own lives in the silence. Then Lena stepped a little closer to me. She said that if I started a new company, she would work for me again. One of the older drivers nodded and said the same. A few more staff looked at each other and gave small nods. Their choice was not loud, but it was clear. Ethan saw it. His shoulders slumped. He looked at Kayla for help, but she had no more clever lines left. She whispered something to him under her breath. I did not need to hear the words. I saw the defeat in her eyes for the first time. Ethan finally asked what he had to sign. Priya opened her own folder and took out a short stack of documents. She explained that these papers confirmed he and Kayla would not contest my ownership of the property, the brand, or the key client relationships. In exchange, I would not push for further investigation into their past transfers and decisions, as long as no new harm appeared. He would keep his separate company name if he wanted, but it would not be tied to this building or this history. His signature would be a line between what he had tried to take and what he could still build on his own. Hands shaking, he signed. Kayla signed too, jaw tight, eyes wet but cold. The bank representatives countersigned the necessary parts. Priya placed each sheet in a folder with practiced care. When it was done, there was no cheer, no applause, just the soft sound of paper sliding against paper. I closed my folder and looked around the warehouse one more time. The shelves, forklifts, and highlights looked the same, but the air felt different. Something had ended and begun at the same time. I reached into my pocket, took out my old company badge and keys, and placed them on a crate at the edge of the group. I told Daniel I would speak with him soon about the new structure. I told the workers who wanted to follow me that they would get details within days. I did not look at Ethan and Kayla again. Then I turned, walked toward the open doors, and stepped out into the cool air. Behind me, voices began to rise in low, stunned waves. In my pocket, the phone was finally silent. I switched it to airplane mode without checking the screen, walked to my old sedan, opened the door, and drove away from the building I had built, leaving the echo of that last quiet decision hanging in the space where my name used to sit on the wall.